So I
Well,
see that we do have the welcome poll box up. For those of you that are with us right now, we'll be starting here in just a couple of minutes or so. So if you have a chance to get situated, grab yourself your coffee, warm it up a little bit, sit down and fill out the welcome poll, and then we'll be ready to go. I see our participants are starting to file in here. The church bells must be ringing, guys.
Well, yeah, but I don't have time. I was gonna have you run up and grab me. If you want to make, well, you can make one here. We got. Whatever you got. Just make a 5. I got here and I'm like, oh no.
Pretty soon we'll be joined by our Facebook friends. So just kind of keep that in mind too. Again, if you're registered to get credits, you need to be watching us on the Zoom. Our Facebook friends will be able to watch, but they will not be able to participate in the credit activity, which will be at the end of our scheduled event here today. Just double checking on a couple of things before we get started, namely the weather forecast. All right, Jim, when are we going to hit 70 degrees here?
Oh boy. Of course, you're cheating, but I would say we're probably going to be 3 weeks probably 3 weeks to a month out.
I was just looking a year ago today. Our high was 60 and our low was 47, and we had just under 2/10 of an inch of rain.
Well, I know that our friends in the fruits would prefer for us to stay a little bit cooler and not get the warm weather. So I'm all for the gradual warm up for sure.
Well, I'm going to have on the show today a gentleman who is involved in the maple syrup harvest. Evidently, that's just starting.
Yeah, they've around here they've been going for about a week, so it should be good. At least we're getting the colder temperatures to keep the sap running.
Yeah, it looks like after we have this little bout of warm, it's going to settle back down just a little bit. But normal is in the low to mid 40s for the next 10 days or so. So that'll be pretty nice. And I think we'll probably remember on Saturday night, or we're going to go to church just a little bit late. Daylight savings time starts Sunday morning.
Yeah, it's always whenever we make that move, it always seems like I'm tired for the next few months until we go back.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, we want to say good morning to our Facebook friends now that have just joined us here with Coffee with Corn. We'll be chit-chatting a little bit with Jim Zook in a moment or two as more of our participants file in anticipation of a very interesting program today. We've had quite a series, Jim, of programs that have really performed well when it came to viewership. A lot of folks really interested. And you know, the nice thing about it, Jim, is a lot of these presentations, folks can review them. They can go to your website as well as the Facebooks.
Well, that's the beauty about this series. And like all of this, you know, we learn things along the way. And I think delivering these programs the way that we're doing it, having people the ability to go back and look is going to be favorable. You know, I think it's definitely going to change the way that we conduct our business. But I think more in all, the series that we've had goes to show the variety of different topics and different areas that we address on behalf of the farmers, and that we help to bring, and that we help to manage for each of the farmers so they don't have to. So I hope that this kind of enlightens our checkoff contributors to all that we actually do. I know a lot of times we have a hard time communicating everything that we work on their behalf. But this series that we've had with all the various topics, I believe does a pretty good job of showcasing all those different areas that we pay attention to on the farmer's behalf.
Now, not only are the Coffee with Corns presented on the website as well as the Facebooks, but I do know that the series that of webinars, and let me take a look here, the Grain Marketing Basics Workshops, which have been going for the past couple of Tuesdays from 7 to 9 in the evening, those are also on the website for the folks to take a look at. And the one tonight, which is the application of all of the different strategies and fundamentals, is going to be also presented not only tonight from 7 till 9, but that will be available on the micorn.org/events. I believe it is part of the website. So folks will be able to take a look at that, especially that strategies one last week, Jim. There were a lot of questions on that particular one.
Well, there always is, you know, and of course, as we always say, in 90 days or 120 days, we'll tell you if you're right. Or, you know, I've heard one of the farmers that used to give a marketing presentation that basically the philosophy is just know that whatever decision you make is going to be wrong. But for that moment that you make that decision, using that information you have, that was the best decision you could make, because you can't look into the crystal ball. So it's just one of those, come up with a plan, know what your cost of production is, know what you got to have to make a profit, and then when it's there, pull the trigger and make that sale.
All I know is Ty Cobb, Babe Ruth, all these guys are in the Hall of Fame, well respected, and I think their batting averages were just a little bit better than a third. So if you can hit that, you're doing pretty good when it comes to marketing a product.
You know, isn't that amazing that you know, we have different measurements for different industries, and baseball, it's only you only got to hit it a third of the time, and you're a hero.
That is something else. Well, Jim, you're going to help us this morning as far as fielding any questions that we're going to have for our guests today. And as we've been mentioning all the way along, our Coffee with Corn series has brought a lot of experts to you, whether you're at home or in your office or even on the road, hopefully pulled off to the side, viewing us on the Facebook. Now, we mentioned Facebook. The MI Corn, Michigan Corn Facebook is also viewed this. You can see it, as well as WSGW, our Farm Service 790 Facebook, and 94.5 The Moose WCEN Facebooks. So it's all over the place. Now, you will be able to get some credits from what I understand today. So we'll have some CCA and CEU credits available for this session. So hopefully you've registered, because the only way you're going to be able to get those is on the Zoom. If you're watching us on Facebook, you will be able to participate with us. If you have any questions, just type it in the comment section. Or if you've got a question for our guest today and you're viewing us on Zoom, just go down to that lower level where it says Q&A, click on that and type in your question as you think of it. And at the end of our presentation today, Jim will be talking to our guests about all the different questions and get some answers for you, because we're touching on a rather, Jim, I want to say delicate subject today, something that quite frankly a lot of folks have to deal with on a daily basis, but you really don't like to talk about it sometimes. But today, our guest is going to help us to address some of those concerns and maybe lighten the load just a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit about him?
So actually, what I'll do is I'll just turn it over to Eric. I did have the opportunity to take in a session that he did host for Commodity Classic last week. He did do a presentation on that. I will just tell you that right up front that this is near and dear to my heart, as I had a very close friend that had a child died of suicide, but they turned that into a positive, and where they actually had created a foundation and now are helping other children be able to deal with the stresses that they have of kids, and they have created a foundation, and they actually have a nice little app that people can use to be helpful that I will definitely share with Eric then when we're over as well. So with that, with no further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Eric, and Eric can introduce himself.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you very much. And thank you for spending the morning with us today. As Jim and Terry both shared, this can be kind of a difficult topic, difficult conversation. So I very much appreciate you, allowing me to be part of your morning. And then also, taking this in, knowing that some of these conversations will be difficult, and everybody responds to these differently. And so I am going to pull up my slide here. But as we go through today, just make sure and as we go through, know that not everything is going to be an easy conversation. Some of the things we're going to talk about coming up are stress, mental health, and suicide. And so, as we kind of go through, I always tell everybody to kind of put their defense wall up, and I'll put some prompts in there for you to do that as well. But just make sure you take care of yourself. But hopefully you'll find some good information as we go through this. And just a little bit background about myself. I like to share that because I really had no intentions of working in the setting, but I feel very fortunate that I do today. Growing up, my grandparents were farmers, and I married into a farming family. And then prior to this, I was the director for a commission on aging, but worked in the public mental health system for over 10 years. In sharing that, I also had the unfortunate experience, both personally and professionally, to see the impact of mental illness on a family, as well as loss of life by suicide. And so I share that up front, knowing that I don't have all of the answers, but I also know that, there is a rich tradition often that comes within the farming industry. And I'd like to share some of those resources and those supports that we're working on with MSU Extension, and then through partners like this with Michigan Corn, where we can outreach and engage with the community that we serve and support. And so as we go through today, some of the objectives that we're going to talk about are understanding some of the signs and symptoms of stress in agriculture, learning the 8 dimensions of wellness, learning how to ask open-ended questions, and improve your understanding signs of the warning signs of suicide, and some of those tools and those resources that are available. And I'll also stop a few different times throughout the presentation today to see if there are any questions or comments or thoughts. Really, the goal for this, if there is somebody that is willing and confident enough to make themselves a little bit vulnerable and maybe share some of their comments or their thoughts or their feedback, it really impacts the value of trainings and conversations like this. And so I would encourage you, if you're thinking something or have a question or a comment, please add that, because somebody else is likely experiencing or feeling that in the same avenue. So situation. We all know that agriculture is a stressful situation, stressful occupation. There are a number of uncontrollable risk factors that are engaged in farming, involved in farming, and we're going to talk about more of those coming up. We also know that it's not oftentimes a 9-to-5 job, and some of those rigors and the ups and downs that we experience as we go through, our day-to-day jobs in farming. In farm stress, what we know that in 2017, 416 farmers and farm workers died from a work-related injury. We also know that opioids are an issue in rural areas, with 3 out of 4 farmers saying that they would have easy access to opioids. In addition to that, oftentimes, because of the rural nature of farming and where farmers often live and reside, oftentimes there's inadequate medical presence that exists in most of these rural communities. And so as we think about farm stress, one notion that I like to share with farmers is this notion called the agrarian imperative. And a lot of times I see it's like a light bulb going off with farmers to say, oh, this makes sense to me now. But really what the agrarian imperative is it's a suggestion that the land really, there's a deep-rooted connection between the farmer and the land. And the thought of losing that land would be the ultimate loss. It would be relational to losing maybe like a family member. And so, as we think about, even making simple decisions that we would think might be simple, the thought of losing that land, sometimes all of that stress, because there are maybe it's a multi-generation connection to the farm or the land. There are all these different nuances that can create stress, and maybe in those situations, the farmer themselves may have a difficult time making a decision that may seem very simple to somebody, but oftentimes it could be connected or tied to this connection that they have to their land. And the agrarian imperative really outlines that. And so defining stress. What is stress? How is stress defined? For today, we're going to use this definition. Stress is defined as a need or demand people confront that is perceived as burdensome or threatening and can lead to physical or mental health problems. And so as we think about stress, you're the expert in this. And what I would encourage all of you to do is think a little bit about what stress looks like to you. What does it sound like to you? What are your physical or your emotional signs of stress? And creating some level of self-awareness really can help people as they go through some of the different things that we're going to talk about coming up. But when you think about yourself, you know yourself best. And so as you think about, what creates stress in your life and how you look or how you sound. I've been doing this for now about 15 years, and I know that I'm a stress eater. And even though I teach this and I work with people on this, sometimes myself, it takes my wife to say, "Hey, Eric, have you recognized this, or this?" Before I say, "Oh, okay, I guess I didn't realize that." And that gives me the ability to kind of step back, reframe my thoughts, and take control of some of the things in my life that maybe are creating stress that I can control, to help reduce some of those signs of stress. And so, if you are in that position, maybe ask somebody that knows you well, what are some of the, how do I respond to stress? Do you act out? Are you angry? Are you frustrated? Do you eat? Maybe do you oversleep? Those are all common signs of somebody that might be experiencing stress. And so as you create this self-awareness, we're going to give you some more tools coming up that will hopefully help you kind of control some of those levels of stress. And so I guess with that, Jim, Claire, Terry, are there any questions or comments at this point?
No, at this point, we do not have any questions that have risen, so continue on.
All right, thank you. Well, please feel free to add in. I think sometimes, if people say maybe I oversleep or I overeat or I feel more tired, that can really prompt some additional conversation. So I'd encourage you to, if you are experiencing or what your personal experience with is with that, please feel free to add that in the chat. So some different signs of stress. People that are experiencing stress, oftentimes on the body, may experience headaches, stomach aches, back aches, high blood pressure, high blood sugar. They may feel like their heart's racing, or they may feel nauseous. In their mind, they may feel anxious, angry, sad, bitter, the feeling of being depressed or hopeless. And then oftentimes in actions for people that are experiencing significant stress, maybe they can't sleep or they sleep too much. They either don't eat, or as I shared, one of my struggles is that I overeat. We may also see an increased use of substances, which could be cigarettes, alcohol, or drugs, tobacco. We may see people that might act out. They may break things. They may yell or scream, or it may start to see people withdraw, start to isolate themselves because there's so many different stresses in their lives. They don't feel like they have the time to invest in maybe some of the things that were very important to them. And we'll link that into maybe some of the other concerns that we'll talk about later on. And so we know that in farming, there are a number of uncontrollable risk factors that create stress. Weather is one of them. Collectively speaking, last year, it seemed like it was a pretty good growing season. But even now, as we start thinking about spring planting, we don't know what the weather's going to be. And as we heard earlier, one out of three, we don't, we can't predict the weather, but that definitely creates a significant amount of stress in farmers in the farming community. Oftentimes, farmers carry large debt loads, and then compliance with government regulations can create a significant amount of stress. Are we doing all of the right things on our farms to be in compliance? What changes have occurred since last year? Equipment or machinery breakdown. A person I work with shared that, one bolt could mean 3 days out of the field. And especially when you have those small windows or those small margins to get out there and get those crops in the field, 3 days could directly impact your ability to generate revenue at the end of the season. High interest rates. Right now, collectively speaking, those are pretty good, but we don't know where they're going to be in a couple of years. And those are definitely things that, farmers need to be concerned about. Crop yields. My father-in-law shared that, every year they would go into the season expecting a bin buster. And then at the end of the season, you're working to try and balance, okay, how am I going to pay for these bills, or where am I going to take this from to offset this cost? And so crop yield is definitely one of those uncontrollable risk factors that create stress in farmers. Same with livestock illness. The loss of an animal directly impacts the ability to produce revenue. And so, maybe if it's a beef producer, the loss of an animal could be thousands of dollars. And where does that going to come from? What do we do? How do we offset that? How do we prevent that? Even though if there are things that you can't control. Commodity prices, the fluctuation in the market, collectively speaking, again, commodity prices have been pretty good right now. But what happens? What is that balance? How much do I sell? How much do I hold on to? Those are all things that create stress. And then also family member disagreements. We may see this in a multi-generational farm where maybe grandpa and grandma are ready to transition out of the farm. Husband, wife, son, daughter are maybe doing all the operations, and now grandchildren are involved, but they see the farm maybe going in a different direction, but grandma and grandpa are still making all of those decisions. And I think that can create a lot of different stress, just the communication alone within that. And so what are those partners? Are they communicating? Are they on the same page? And oftentimes that can create a lot of stress because there is a lot of emotional investment in the farm and successful operation of the farm and business.
So Eric, a question that we have right now, which I think is a very good question and timely. When do you know it's time to seek professional help?
Well, I think if you're starting to experience that is a great question. I appreciate that. So I think if, a number of these different things are starting to impact the quality of life, if you recognize that maybe you're oversleeping, or you're not sleeping, or you feel yourself up at night worrying about things that you can't control, those might be, or also, I guess one additional thing I would put in there is, do you or others see you struggling and making decisions that historically were pretty easy for you? I think those would be all indicators that maybe you are experiencing a significant amount of stress. And if you don't take control of that, it could lead to further complications down the road. So, I think doing some self-reflection, what are those things that are creating the stress in your life? Can you control some of those? And if you see yourself experiencing some of those concerns, it's probably a great time to reach out. And I'm going to share some really cool resources that we have available to Michigan farmers. But those could be signs that you may want to reach out and take control of some of these things. But we'll also talk about a few different tools you can try independently as well. So thank you for that question. I hope that gave you a little further insight. Anything else at all, Jim?
No, that's all we have at this point for questions. But yeah, again, I thought there's a great question, and feel free to ask those questions. And if we can work them in the conversation here, or I may wait till the end. But Eric, continue on.
All right. Okay, so kind of going along really with that question and talking a little bit about what are the signs and symptoms of stress, we're going to talk about creating kind of your toolbox a little bit and thinking about some different things that, if you are experiencing that stress, some things that you might be able to try or incorporate into your life. And so, think about maybe some of these different strategies that you feel will work for you. maybe brainstorming and exploring a variety of different coping strategies that are available. And hopefully after today, you'll learn some new strategies for adopting different ways to manage your stress that maybe you haven't used before. And like I always share with people, there is no one size fits all when it comes to stress management. What works for Eric may not work for the next person. And so as we go through, these are just some different ideas that maybe you can incorporate into your life to help balance some of that stress. And I think if you really believe that it's going to work for you, likely it will. If you don't think it will work for you, try some of these other things, because you'll probably have a better results with that. And so some of these things that we're going to talk about come from the 8 dimensions of wellness. And so as you think about this, it's almost like a toolbox. You don't necessarily need and use every tool in your toolbox every day, but it's nice to know that they're in there. So when you do need them, you can access them. And that's kind of the approach I like to take when we talk about stress management. And so as part of your toolbox, there's the 8 dimensions of wellness, and those are physical, intellectual, financial, environmental, spiritual, social, occupational, and emotional. And we're going to talk a little bit more about those right now. And so the first dimension of wellness is physical. Any form of exercise can relieve stress. And I'll be the first person to tell you that, exercise to me today looks a lot different than it did 15 years ago. But it's really a great opportunity to, if it's outside, you kind of, like to the last couple of days, we've had some sunshine, and that's been nice, and that can be re-energizing and rejuvenating too. But any form of physical exercise can really help support stress management. And I think too, we'll talk about time management as well within that. But, even just getting outside, maybe it's a 5-minute walk, maybe it is a mile jog, maybe it is, maybe it is going to the gym and working out, whatever exercise looks and feels like to you, it can really help support the reduction of stress in your life. And so I would definitely encourage you to think about, as you are going through, what does exercise look like to you? Are you feeling stressed? What could I start implementing maybe every day that would get me outside or get me physically active? And so the next dimension of wellness is intellectual. Activities that engage your mind, such as reading or journaling, puzzles, Sudoku could be a good thing, are really good coping tools. They help kind of redirect your thinking off of maybe some of your immediate stress and of some of your concerns that are right up front. And it gives you that opportunity to kind of maybe drift away from some of the stress and focus your attention on different things. And so if there are different things that work for you or that you like, maybe think about it. How much time are you investing in that? How engaged are you in doing some of those things to help get yourself a little bit more rejuvenated to reduce some of those stresses? Next is financial. Money management resources can provide strategies and solutions for money-related stress. Oftentimes when I'm meeting with farmers, financial is kind of that overarching umbrella that a lot of people come to and are, feeling the strain or feeling the concerns about financial things. And so, I oftentimes work with our farm team, our farm financial management team, to go through what are some of those things. Do you have a plan? What does that look like? What are some of your goals? Do your goals align with what your plan is? How do we get there? Those are all different things that as you kind of work through and think about financially, can reduce a lot of stress. So it's not, we come down to the end of the year and we're trying to figure out how we're going to pay those bills and making sure that, we are in a good position to make decisions financially. That can really help reduce a lot of the burden and the stress related to financial management. Next is environmental. Spending non-work time in nature or green spaces has been shown to relieve stress. Having the opportunity to get outside. One person in particular that I spoke with kind of left a lasting impression in my life when they shared that, they didn't realize how stressed they were until they started working through and incorporating some of these very things that we're talking about today. And once they started to take control for the first time, they recognized the smell of the fresh cut grass. They recognized the birds chirping. They recognized, the leaves as they started to, I guess, sprout and bloom in the spring, and the color change in the fall. And they said really for 5+ years in their life, they had been under so much stress that they missed all of those things. And once they started to, I think, take control of some of that stress, they started to recognize that. And so environmentally can really help reduce some of those levels of stress as well. And so as we move forward in the 8 dimensions of wellness, the next one is spiritual. Connecting yourself with the world around you through prayer or other forms of spirituality can be beneficial for stress reduction. Excuse me. And if you're not a spiritual person, another thing that you may consider is meditation. Just giving that opportunity to really get connected with yourself, to get connected with maybe what next steps might be, to take that time to really focus on you can be beneficial in pushing aside some of those immediate stressors in your life. Next is social. Staying in close touch with family or friends and seeking opportunities to make new friends, maybe participating in community functions, are all very important in dealing with stress. Staying connected with people. One person shared that the best investment they made was the dollar that they spent every day for coffee. And as we talked a little bit more through that, they shared that, through that $1 and meeting with some of their peers, staying connected with some of their friends and farming colleagues, gave them the opportunity to vent, gave them the opportunity to problem solve, it gave them the opportunity to kind of troubleshoot and think of some different ideas and really explore some different approaches and techniques that other people were using. And that really helped them stay connected and was very valuable in terms of managing some of their stress. It was a good balance for them. And so I know right now during the pandemic, this has been particularly difficult, but even opportunities like Zoom or things are starting to open back up now. If you have those opportunities to get engaged or stay engaged, I'd really encourage you to reach out. And I think you'll really see the benefit that this can have in terms of your positivity, your outlook, and your ability to manage stress. So next is occupational. Whoops, and that slipped. There we go. Occupational. Allowing yourself time to recharge or establish boundaries and work-life balance is important. And this can be particularly difficult for farmers because oftentimes they may live on the farm or near the farm. And so what are some of those things that you might be able to do to kind of detach yourself from work so it's not 24/7 feeling like there's just work associated stress. One person shared that their approach for this was once they took their work boots off at the front door, even though they lived on their farm, once they took their work boots off, they didn't do any additional work unless it was an emergency situation. And that kind of helped them take the switch, I guess, switch from work to home life so that they could better engage and focus on their family. One thing, and I snapping my fingers, but one approach I used oftentimes in the public mental health system was that to teach people positivity, to teach people to reconnect and engage and focus on the positive. And so through that intervention, what I would do is every time somebody would start to think about the negative, I would encourage them to physically snap their fingers, and that created that physical reaction to redirect their thought into a positive thing. And so, if they caught themselves feeling or thinking about the negative, snapping their fingers and thinking about the positive, over time, what you're doing is you're creating positivity within yourself. You're teaching yourself healthy habits about thinking and staying focused on the positive opposed to on the negatives, which just continue to kind of cultivate stress. And really, I think over time, what you'll see if you try this approach is that you'll start teaching yourself to just think in a positive manner. And over time, you'll see yourself snapping your fingers less because you've taught yourself a positive habit, positive reinforcement. And that one kind of ties into the last dimension of wellness that we're going to talk about is emotional. Detaching yourself from temporary stressors using techniques, reframing your thoughts, and participating can be very helpful in stress management. And so if we think about and incorporate that snapping your fingers to redirect your thoughts, really you're teaching yourself to think positive and to redirect maybe some of your focus that is on your immediate stress to things that are positive, things that are uplifting. Another example that I like to share is that, one farmer shared that their spouse saved their life. And as we talked a little bit more about that, they said it was during a time where there was a significant amount of prevent plant happening. There were flooding all over in Michigan, and their spouse made them go on a vacation. And they said that even though at that time it was difficult financially because they knew that a number of their fields had been flooded, which was directly going to impact their ability to generate revenue, yet forcing them to go on vacation gave them something to look forward to. It got them away from the farm that was creating all of the stress, just looking around, knowing that there was nothing they could do with flooded fields. But then it also gave them an opportunity to reflect back and have a positive thing to look, to talk about and share. And so that was really recharging and rejuvenating for that person in particular during that difficult time. And so as we think about these 8 dimensions of wellness, think about what might work for you. Think about, as you recognize and are aware of the things that cause you stress, your approach to stress, what are some of these tools that you might be able to use and incorporate in your life to help balance some of those supports, or to help balance some of those stresses, I'm sorry. And so, Jim, I guess, were there any other questions or comments before we kind of move into the next?
No, there's not, but it's interesting, the comment about the coffee shop and going to just to have that time with others to just talk about things and kind of unwind, forget about what's going on for a bit. I found that very interesting because I used to, in my previous life when I was in sales, I spent the time at a coffee shop. And it was interesting to see the farmers that were in there just to get away and relax. And I never really thought about that as a way to relieve the stress. So I found that very helpful.
Jim, you really bring up a good point because I recall many years ago, my father never participated in the coffee shop, but he did have a lot of other things that he did. But we had a neighbor, and the neighbor always went to the coffee shop. They talked about all sorts of different things, which was great. They kibitzed back and forth about some techniques that they used in the field for certain crops, and even how wide the tiles should be in the fields. I mean, they were talking about all sorts of things. And then one day, they noticed that a particular farmer was not coming to the coffee shop anymore. He wasn't coming at all. And it threw up a red flag to some of the guys way back then. And they started to ask, and they found out that he was having some challenges at home. And quite frankly, it was that group of individuals that he was used to talking to on a daily basis that brought him back. And I'll never forget that as long as I live, because they talk about peer pressure, but there's also pure wellness. And it's just the ability to be able to talk freely, I guess, with someone you feel good about.
Yeah, I think I very much appreciate you sharing that, and I think that's kind of an example that we'll talk about coming up too. But there's also this peer support, as you kind of referred to as peer wellness. I mean, it's a very natural thing for farmers to connect with, and even though it may look like and feel like really that you're at the coffee roundtable, it's very good in terms of decreasing signs of depression, staying connected, staying engaged with your peers. And so there are a number of different studies that are associated to social isolation and increased symptomology of depression. And this is kind of one of those natural ways to decrease those signs and keep the farmers engaged. So I very much appreciate sharing that.
Eric, another comment to it I think is so important. And I know sometimes people don't mean it in a bad way, but it may come off of that. But comment is, it's very important to communicate with your spouse. Keeping your mouth shut rather than poking the bear is a tragedy and does not work. You need to have that open communication with them. And so I think that too is very important for people to be aware of.
Yeah, I appreciate that comment. And I think that plays in really well with this next part that we're going to talk about in terms of communication with the farmer and spouses. I mean, when I say farmer, I think farm family, I think farm worker, I think rancher, I think all of these kind of maybe, I guess, subcategories, if you will, of farming. But communication is key in essentially all of this. Everything that I do with my work at MSU Extension and my personal life, my professional life, communication is huge and can really set the stage for what maybe good approaches might be. And one of those approaches is asking open-ended questions, which we're going to talk about. And so I think that was a great segue into this next section. But we know that farmers are a unique culture. We know that there's this kind of inherent independence that a lot of farmers really take pride in. And communication sometimes can be a barrier. And I know this on a lot of different levels. But also, just asking open-ended questions can really promote relationship development. It can ensure trust and mutual understanding. And it's not always easy if a person's, kind of prides themselves on being able to take care of everything and being that strong, independent force. Sometimes it can be a little bit more difficult. But hopefully, as we talk about some of these different skills, these are things that you can incorporate and better engage in those discussions and conversation. And so please know that learning and practicing and modeling this skill can really have an impact on how successful it is. As I've shared, I've been doing this for 15 years and I'm still not perfect at it, but practice makes perfect, just like anything in life. And so as we kind of go through these next examples, I would encourage you to think about this and know that it's okay if you struggle a little bit at first, but the more you practice, learn from what those responses look like, and maybe kind of change your approach a little bit as you move forward. And so when we think about closed-ended questions are those that will produce a yes or no answer, or maybe a brief response like sometimes, I guess, I don't know, sure, whatever. Where open-ended questions allow for a richer and deeper conversation that really flow with empathy, and they lead people to answer more fully and honestly in communicating their thoughts other than just, no, I'm good. And so we're going to give you some examples of these differences between open and closed-ended questions. So I won't read through all of them, but I definitely want to give you a snapshot of what the difference is and may sound like. So an example of a closed-ended question could be, are you ready to make a decision? Depending on where that person's at, if maybe they are experiencing a significant amount of stress, or maybe they're frustrated, or whatever that situation may be, it's going to be no. Yes, I am. I don't know. I'm not sure where I'm at right now in terms of that. Where if you change the wording of that to what's holding you back from making a decision, you may hear much more information about that. Maybe it's an example from a dairy farm where they, are thinking about, maybe one partner is thinking about getting out of the business, but they haven't talked with the other partner. And so, you learn a lot about, what are some of those things that are holding them back to help engage with them and maybe help them work through, or help them kind of problem solve or troubleshoot how they might be able to improve that opportunity or improve that line of communication. Another way of saying that is, what else do you need help with to help you make a decision? You may hear, I don't know, but you may also hear, I just don't know how to talk to Eric, because I know that he's been with me on the farm since we were 8, and I know it's going to break his heart, or I feel like it's going to break his heart if I move on, but I don't know what else to do. I'm not happy. We're struggling to pay the bills, and I think there's an opportunity for me to get another job right now and have a better work-life balance. And so that could be an example of kind of the change discussion. Another example might be, are you feeling okay? most of the time, at least in my family and my extended family, you're going to hear, yeah, I'm fine. Or I'm not that great right now. But, another way you could ask that or reword that in more of an open-ended, you could say, tell me what's bothering you. Because you obviously, if you've had a good relationship with that person, or depending on what that relationship looks like, you may know or recognize that things are bothering them. And so that would give them that opportunity to expand on what those are. Or another way of asking that in more of an open-ended approach is, how do you feel about that? And then that gives you the opportunity, it gives you the opportunity as the listener to get a better understanding of what it is that they're saying, and then as the speaker to share some more of their concerns or comments or questions or whatever that might be. And so, did I see a couple of questions pop up there before I move on?
So one of the comments was, and I think you could probably take this comment in many different ways, but it could be that one is we could look at it as stress with technology can be challenging to older farmers. And then when they have to go ask their kids for help, that could be humiliating to them. But by the same token, we need to think about it too is, with technology, with the farmers, yeah, it may be stress, but they may need to go ask their younger kids. But as kids, I think it's very important for the kids to understand that going through these communication tools could be very helpful to where they could actually figure out, hey, something's different with dad or grandpa that, maybe needs to kind of ward that off, or at least let some other people know about it. And I think as with older farmers, they shouldn't be humiliated, because even here at our office, I've learned that it's the younger employees that know that a whole lot better than I. Their mind thinks totally differently that you have to for technology than we do today. And that's just, we just have to deal with it. We think about how we used to, our horsepower was actually horses, and how you handled that. And then when you went to the tractor, well, that was a totally different concept. We're in all these changes. That's always changing all the time. That, it's as farmers, we just need to just be aware of that. And it's okay not to know and to ask. But I think it's a two-way street here, that even the younger generation needs to be aware of what's going on to be that help as well.
Yeah, I think technology is always changing, and it was really interesting as I was kind of hearing that question. Even when I was the director for the Commission on Aging, it was interesting because even within that population that was served, there were just generational gaps. So there were the 60-year-olds, there were the 70 to 80-year-olds, and there were the 90-year-olds, and there were gaps in technological exposure even within that population. And so I think really this is maybe more of a blanket response, but the approach to that, are you open and willing to engage and learn some of the new technology, or is it just a push off? Because that could be directly related to the response that you're going to get from the children. And then also, what is the approach to asking that? Is it I can't stand these computers. They just, every time I touch them, I'm mad about them. Well, that creates that conversation and a negative approach to begin with. And then, if you're reaching out to Eric to help support you as your son, I'm going to go into that and say, Dad's never going to get it anyways. How are we going to get through this? Where if you are more open to that and say, I think this could be something that really could benefit the farm. Eric, do you know much about this? The approach to that, and the way it's worded and how it's questioned really could, I think, maybe cultivate more of that relationship, and set the stage for I don't know, better discussion or better learning curve around that too. So
I've seen too, Eric, where in families, the younger farmer who is and wants to be more involved understands a lot of the technology quicker. And so he's able to grasp it. And I really feel a lot of times the strength of the family unit is going to make this technological difference work and flow a lot easier. And so ultimately, when it's all said and done, it kind of goes back to just how open is the dad to the son, the daughter, the wife? How open is the family unit in communicating the different challenges that might come up? Because dad has got to realize, I guess, that, hey, I'm not going to pick up this technology as quick as what my son is, but yet I still want to learn. I want to be told, and I want to pick it up, because ultimately I might have to be in that combine running this equipment, and I've got to know what that gauge and what that screen is telling me, because right now the younger generation has been running it because they pick up on it right away and just run with it. But it's open communication, and I think a lot of it goes back to this communication tool that you have up on the screen right now. The family really does have to learn how to ask open-ended questions, because that will relieve a lot of stress down the road. I see it not in active farm, just in day-to-day living, because of all the stresses of day-to-day living.
Yeah, I think those are really good points. And I would also say too that this is a two-way street. You can't teach experience. And I always tell people that too, so if you are a 40-year farmer, there are a lot of things in life experiences that are learned that, maybe technology might improve, but, I think for the next generation too, remember that, dad and grandpa and mom and grandma, whoever that may be, whatever that role is, they have a lot of experience under their belt too. And so, working together to kind of maybe ask the right questions and say, how do we utilize this to improve our farm business? How do we utilize technology to kind of expand on the foundation that we have? And so I think those are all very good points. And so just a couple more examples of closed and open-ended questions. And, as I shared, if you were going back to that example that was kind of presented, if you feel like you're incorporating the more of an open-ended approach, but you get a closed-ended response, maybe we do a little reflection and say, okay, well, that didn't go exactly the way I thought it would be. How might I reword that and see what those responses change and learn from that? There is a learning curve with all of this. And so, excuse me. A couple more examples of closed and open-ended questions are you happy with the way things are? You may hear, well, no, dad thinks he knows everything. He doesn't want to incorporate this new technology, this new GPS system in the combine that I know is going to help support us. I know it's going to make things more efficient, and I want to get home to my family. But instead, I'm over here arguing with him about not putting it in. And so, again, that was a closed-ended example that I gave more of an open-ended response to, but a different approach to that could be, tell me about things that are going well for you. I like this in a lot of different ways because it focuses on the positive. And so if we kind of stuck along with that example that I just used, well, we have a good family business. We've been in operation for a number of years. We have a significant amount of equipment, but we also think the equipment could be updated with some of these new technological advances that I think would really help the production. But, there's a lot of resistance from grandma and grandpa right now to do that. And so then as you kind of go through, you could say, well, have we talked to grandma and grandpa about this? No, I know they're not going to like it because they get mad about everything with technology. So, as you kind of work through that conversation, you've learned a lot about that person. You've learned a lot about that situation. And you may be able to, as the listener, help them kind of problem solve and troubleshoot. And I do this all the time with farmers. What are some of those next steps? What are some of those approaches we might be able to take? And so, those are a few examples. There are more examples here, but I think the biggest thing, really is if you're getting closed-ended responses, maybe think about the approach that you're taking, think about the questions that you're asking, and don't be afraid to kind of change that up so that, you do get more of those open and clear responses. And so I guess with that, are there any other questions or comments about open and closed-ended questions?
So, well, maybe what we ought to do is go ahead, if you got some more, We do have a couple other comments, questions, and all of that. Maybe for sake of time, I'll have you go through the rest of your presentation, and then we'll get to those, because they're really good questions and comments that are out there.
Okay, sounds good. So as we move into this next part, as I shared, we're going to talk about the warning signs of suicide. Everybody may have different feelings or emotional connections to this, and so just take care of yourself. It can be kind of a deep conversation. It can be difficult things to say. It can be difficult things to talk about, but it is very valuable information to have and to know. And so what are some warning signs of somebody that might be thinking about suicide? Oftentimes, we may hear people that are talking or writing about death or suicide. People may feel hopeless or trapped or like a burden. We may see people start giving away prized possessions. And this doesn't have to be like a big monetary gift. It doesn't have to be a random $10,000 check. It could be as simple as maybe a family heirloom belt buckle that Eric's uncle gave to him. And it was just kind of out of the blue and random, like this was great grandpa's belt buckle. Why are you giving me this now? It kind of didn't make sense. Another warning sign could be making a plan or acquiring means. Oftentimes in the farming or the agricultural community, we won't see somebody go out and purchase a weapon because oftentimes they have access to those, but that could be another warning sign. We may see people saying goodbyes, saying, hey, Eric, thank you. I appreciate the relationship that we've had over the last 30 years. I know I've been under a lot of stress, but I finally have a solution figured out for us. So I just wanted to say thank you. And that could be a warning sign, especially if somebody's been struggling or experiencing a significant amount of stress. Isolating themselves from others. I don't think there was probably a better example than what Terry shared earlier about the farmer that was engaged in the coffee group. Maybe it's weekly, maybe it's daily, whatever that might be. But then, they're no longer attending. They're no longer participating. Maybe they're experiencing some of these stresses. And if you are in those social groups, it's a great opportunity for members of the group to reach out and reconnect, re-engage, and bring them back in. But oftentimes people that may be considering suicide will start pushing themselves away from people and continue to isolate themselves. We may also see a loss of interest. So maybe somebody that was an active participant in several different community functions now, maybe they say they don't have the time, or they don't, I don't care. I've put 30 years into that. And it doesn't really matter to me anymore. That could be something, especially if they've been a stakeholder and very involved in different functions, whatever that might be. And then last is mood change. We may see periods of highs to low or lows to high for people that might be considering taking their life by suicide. And so as we think about the next steps, if you recognizing some of these warning signs, you have concerns maybe about the person, what do we do? The recommendation, evidence-based research suggests that we want to ask them directly, are you having thoughts of suicide? Asking somebody if they're thinking about hurting themselves may generate a different response than saying, are you thinking about taking your life by suicide? Maybe they're not actually thinking about hurting themselves. Maybe they are thinking about taking their life. And so this can be very difficult, just like the open-ended questions. The more you practice it, if you haven't said the word suicide before, that could be a good starting point. Put yourself in a position, maybe ask it in front of a mirror, maybe when you're driving to and from wherever you're going, just put yourself in a position and ask the question, are you thinking about taking your life by suicide? I had the opportunity almost a year ago today to be down in Savannah, Georgia, training a number of different members for the National Farmers Union, as well as the American Farm Bureau Federation. And this was a very emotion-evoking topic. A lot of people, some people had difficulty saying the word suicide. Some people had difficulty presenting the question. And I think that everybody kind of just responded to that a little bit different. But it can save a life. And I'm very happy to share that after leaving that training, the very stuff that we're talking about right now, I had the opportunity following a few weeks after to meet with a person that attended that training. And they shared that how they were confronted with this very situation. A person was thinking about taking their life by suicide. They asked them directly, "Are you thinking about suicide?" The person said yes, and they were able to go through, navigate the discussion, provide some of the resources that we're going to share here in a second, and ultimately save that person's life. So it's a goosebump moment, but we know that this works. And so with that, what if you're put in that position and someone says yes? The biggest thing I would encourage you to do is just don't leave that person alone. Don't say, Eric, you have all this stuff going for you. I know you'll get through it. I'm going to give you a call tomorrow, and we'll just keep plugging along and get through this. If a person says that they are thinking about taking their life by suicide, many of us are not mental health counselors equipped to handle suicidal situations. So a couple different things you may be able to do is call for help. Call the National Suicide Line, which I'll share with you coming up. Maybe take them to the hospital. If it's a hostile situation and you're concerned about it, call 911. Those are all different ideas or situation solutions that you might be able to try or do. We just don't want to leave that person alone. And so, as I kind of alluded to, there is the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. That number is 1-800-273-TALK or 1-800-273-8255. An example might be, if you were meeting with Eric, maybe it's at my farm, and you say, Eric, I'm concerned about you. Are you thinking about taking your life by suicide? I say yes. And you say, Eric, I really appreciate you sharing that. I'm not the person that's equipped to handle this situation, but would you be okay if I dialed this 1-800 number? It's a suicide prevention lifeline, got you connected with somebody that you can. And once I get you connected, I'm going to step over, I'm going to give you my phone, and I'm going to step over here, and we're going to get a plan in place so that, we can get you the right supports that you need. And so that could be an example of how you may be able to utilize that. I guess, Jim, are there any other questions or comments on this part at all before I talk about some additional supports and resources?
No, well, no, we'll have one comment towards the end, and I don't know if it's really, it's kind of a questionable if it's for this, but continue on.
Okay. All right. And this is a difficult conversation, difficult discussion, difficult information, but I am very excited to share that in an effort to continue to provide resources to the farmers and agricultural community, in April of last year, MSU Extension partnered with Pine Rest Behavioral Health and created the teletherapy pilot project. And I'm proud to say that this has been kind of my baby since I joined the MSU Extension team. And there are a couple of really cool and key points that I wanted to share about this opportunity. Farmers are able to connect with master's level therapists or counselors through online counseling. And so that really reduces a lot of the stigmas associated to maybe driving your vehicle up to a mental health provider's office. You can meet with them in the comfort of your own home or your farm or wherever that place of comfort is. Another really cool thing about this program and this opportunity is that all of the therapists themselves are either farmers or have a connection to the agricultural field. And so the farmers that have been accessing the program really shared that there's a level of empathy that that the therapists they're talking to recognize maybe some of the trials and tribulations that the farming community might have. And then in addition to that, we also, I'm very happy to share, have been the recipients of some funding to help support and offset the cost. It's on a first come, first served basis. But one thing that we really wanted to make sure of is that people that were, experiencing stress or, mental health needs or thinking about suicide weren't confronted with the situation of trying to say, okay, do I buy Cheerios for my kids or do I go see a therapist? And so right now, there are supports to either offset most, if not all, of the associated fees for this program. And so if you are experiencing stress, or if you know somebody that is, please know that this support is out there. There are a number of farmers that have been accessing it, and don't let pride get in the way of you getting supports that might really help you and your family in the long run, would be my message to that. In addition to that, there are some other resources. There's a Center for Rural Affairs, which is listed there. There's a crisis text line, so you can text 741-741-GO or help. And like the National Suicide Hotline, this is a platform that you can connect with a person that's equipped to handle suicidal thoughts through text. Some people are more comfortable with that. There's also the Iowa Concern Hotline. That number is 1-800-447-1985. Mental health first aid. And I'm going to share a little bit more about a cool opportunity that we have through our Michigan Corn Partnership towards the end here. There's a national suicide line that I shared earlier, the National Suicide Prevention Crisis Chat, and there's also the Veterans Crisis Line. And so with that, I'm going to pause for a second, and I'm going to throw this link in the chat box, because we do have a couple more resources and tools that I wanted to share with everyone here. But I'm going to ask that you take just about 30 seconds to fill out this anonymous survey. This really is invaluable information to us at MSU Extension as we create different programs and outreach efforts and engagements. It is one of those catalysts that help us create even like the teletherapy program. We recognize the need. And so if I could ask that everybody take a moment to fill this out, it would be very much appreciated. And I will put that in the chat, and then we'll follow up with questions and a few additional resources that I'm happy to share.
So as you're doing that, Eric, some comments that we've had in the chat area is that one individual said that they found talking to non-farmers helps them get through some issues and forget some of the stress that they have at that time. And again, I think the biggest thing is just opening up and communicating and talking with some others. And some others have said this has been some great insight as well. So, and then one question that we know that adds to stress, and again, I've seen this numerous times, and it's always a challenge, and again, on how you communicate with people is, but what happens when you have a father that doesn't want to let go of the reins? It's creating issues with their sons. It's not that they don't maybe need each other anymore, but it's just how you go about communicating that it's time to step down and let the younger generation make those decisions. And it's very hard. I've seen it all over. I mean, the little things that I've had communication, and this is kind of the example I use with some of my friends too, is in that transition period. Again, everybody is different, but do they allow the younger generation to plant? In a crop farm, planting is the most important thing. It's really kind of a show that I think you can do this. On a beef farm, it's whether or not the individual trusts the younger generation to do artificial insemination. There's things like that are major key decision-making opportunities for that operation that I think that farmers need to think about, because and again, it's hard. Everybody's at a different level at that point of when they feel comfortable in letting go of those reins, and then being there, because I will tell you, even though the sons may think they've got it all figured out, which maybe they do, having that other individual there to bounce the ideas off of is so important. So, those are the comments that I will make, and maybe you got some other insight.
Yeah, I think that I'm glad that you brought that up. And I think, as I tried to share with some of the examples, I think that we are working with a number of different farms that are experiencing this. And I think that is, I think that can be related to maybe even that can't sleep at night, staying up at night, worrying about what the next step of the farm may look like. I guess one thing I would encourage is, do we have a succession plan in place? What does that look like? What does that sound like? Do we have kind of a business structure? What does that look like? What does that sound like? Um, you know, Understanding the agrarian imperative and how deeply connected dad in this example might be to that farm, and what all that entails. And how do we is there a transition plan? Do we have, what stake do the partners all have? And as you shared, Jim, I think it's very important is, are the sons and daughters of that farm feeling that they are making some of those important decisions? Do they have control to do some of that? Because a lot of times there's that balance of, well, dad said he wants to retire, but he's still here making every decision and doing all the stuff that I feel like I'm equipped to do now. And so I think there can be a lot of turbulence around that, and there can be a lot of concerns. Is there one blanket answer for all of it? No, but I think, what is that relationship with that family? What does that look like? There's a number of supports that are available through MSU Extension to maybe help look at that through a different lens. And so I definitely empathize with that. I think through lines of communication, talking about that plan, what that looks like, is there a transition plan? Is there a succession plan? Those are all things strongly encourage people that are in that situation to consider.
Eric, do you have any partnerships, or have you been involved in partnerships with, let's say, teachers unions, ministers, groups, organizations, to help them? Because in many cases, folks will go there, or some of those folks will understand what's happening with an individual or a family unit.
Yeah, I think that is one of the things that we are actively working on. Who are some of those community stakeholders? Maybe even, we know that a number of farmers are connected to religious affiliations. How do we get and disseminate some of this information to them so that they're better equipped to handle that? Maybe things that they're confronted with. Are we there yet? No. But I also think in the same breath, hopefully we're not there on any of this, because we continue to advance, we continue to create new opportunities and ideas, and as we continue to progress, it creates different opportunities. Just like, as difficult as the pandemic was, it created Coffee with Corn, a virtual platform where now, maybe we're outreaching and connecting with thousands of people across the US, where before it wasn't really necessarily something that we'd even considered. And so, I think just opportunities and things like this where we can outreach and engage and gain exposure, we'll continue to hopefully pave new roads into those different partnerships and those different industries. So hopefully that answered your question, Terry.
Yes, it did. Jim, do we have any other questions, comments that you've been able to glean?
So we do not have any more at this point. I think when Eric, when you get totally wrapped up, I would like to share an app that covers everything on all the helplines that you talked about, that I think would be very helpful for individuals. And it's something new to you. I haven't exposed this to you yet, but I was going through the app just to make sure all those hotlines were included, and yes, they are. And it's really a great app. So go ahead and finish up, Eric.
Excellent. Yeah, well, there are just a couple of remaining slides, and I appreciate you sticking on here, because I know this can be kind of a difficult and mentally taxing topic of discussion. But I just want to share about a couple of opportunities from a recent grant that we're calling Legacy of the Land through MDARD and Fransan, but really kind of to address some of the issues that were presented today through the comments. Through this grant, if you or your farm could benefit from this, I would encourage you reaching out. There are 2 links in the bottom. I'm also happy to share those in the chat, or they're available on the MSU Extension Farm Stress website and the MSU Extension Farm Management website. But through this opportunity, excuse me, we are offering the opportunity for farmers to engage in farm financial analysis with our farm educators, farm business educators. And so through that, we can create some different business management strategies. They'll have the opportunity to connect with TelFarm system if they want, and that is also at a significantly reduced fee, if not free, for farmers to engage in that service. In addition to that, there are a number of farm stress resources and outreach activities that we're doing. The teletherapy funding support was included in this grant, and so if there is really no better time, especially with spring planting coming up. If you are experiencing some of these signs of stress, it's essentially a risk-free opportunity for you to engage in next level supports to help put you in a good frame of mind and put you in a good position for some of the rigors that we know are ahead. And then finally, mental health first aid. I'm very excited to share that MSU Extension is partnered with Michigan Corn, and we are going to be providing 20 seats to attend this evidence-based practice training. And so through this, people are engaged really on a next level discussion about many of the topics that we talked about today: mental health, suicide awareness. What are some of those resources? What are some of those tools? And as part of the completion of this program, it's an internationally recognized evidence-based practice. And through this, they are credited with a certification. And so I would encourage people that are interested to maybe reach out to myself or Claire, as there are only, it is capped at 20 seats, but we're very excited about that partnership and the opportunity within that. And so I guess with that, there are the number of different resources. Feel free at any point to reach out to me through the best approach is probably through the MSU Extension website, MSU Extension Farm Stress. All my contact information is there. And I guess if there are any other questions or comments.
So we don't have any other questions, and I'm going to try to play the share my screen at this point. So let me try this again.
Now you
so
said, Jim, this is an app that is available?
So this is an app that's available, and it looks like this, and it's the name of the app is Got Your Back. And this was developed by a friend of mine, like I said, who lost their son to suicide. So what it is, though, is all of these numbers that Eric talked about are on there. So this is where when you click on the bottom, it means that you're actually in the area right now. When it says I'm okay, actually you're not okay. And so this is something I've discussed with them, but so these are areas that you can go to and get help. One of the things about this app is it allows you to put in 3 close friends. And these 3 close friends, it's just a click, and it just basically will say that I need to talk to somebody. I need to talk to you now. And so that is really very simple. The crisis text hotline, you click on that button and boom, it takes you right there, ready to text at that point. So then when you do click on the I'm okay, this is the next thing that pops up, these next 2, where it does give you some things that you can do for calming yourself down. It gives you different exercises you can do to do that. You click on the support locator, it'll list all of the resources that are close to wherever you're at. Doesn't matter, if you got your geolocate on, it'll come up with what's there. Again, it's counting exercises, refocusing, deep breathing exercises. These are all in this app. I would encourage all of you who are on this call to, if anything, just download it. You have it on the phone. You never know when you may need to do that. And so it's definitely an app that we'd like to get out to more people, because it is it is really like a one click and boom, you've got help right there.
Yeah, very
So
cool. Thank you for sharing that.
I would, Eric, I just want to tell you that I think this was fantastic today. You know, we just never, I know that at some point that somebody's going to use these techniques. Because I was going back through and I was thinking about all the people that I know that have died of suicide. And it's, you know, some of them you kind of forget about from time to time. And so I think it's very helpful. I know that we had a number of people that are in the retail business that were on this. To me, that is going through training like this that's coming up is very important for them, because a lot of times they're the first people that are on the farm. And, you know, the recognition that I can still remember walking onto a person's farm and he just started chewing me out. I come at the wrong time for everything that was going on at that point. Didn't have any training in all of this. Had I had that, I might have asked more questions, you know, because you wouldn't have known maybe where they were at that point in time. But I think anybody who's in the crop sales should really be trained in this. So with that, thank you again. And Terry, I guess I'll turn it back to you.
Well, Eric, Jim, the comments that I saw, one that jumps right out at me is this is great insight. And quite frankly, I've really enjoyed this presentation today because it's not only shed a lot of light as to things that have happened in my life, but just like Jim, now I have a little bit better understanding in some individual cases where I might have been able to really help a person. And I did not know at that time how to do it. So again, thank you so much for the information. In closing now, we do have our closing poll box up. For those of you involved in the Zoom presentation, we want to encourage you to fill that out and stay with us because we'll have more information on your credit availability and how to do that. And at this time, we're going to say farewell and thank you very much for viewing our people on Facebook, Coffee with Corn. And we look forward to seeing you next Tuesday, when once again we'll have another edition of Coffee with Corn. Again, when you have a chance, fill out that closing poll box. I'll be more than happy to register a lot of those answers. We really appreciate your input, and just like we did our presenter today, very interesting information, and we look forward to hearing from each and every one of you, our viewers today, on your thoughts of how valuable you thought this webinar was today. Next week, Jim, you'll be a part of our program. I guess we're going to be talking about the future of ethanol. And we're going to have Kathy Bergeron with the National Corn Growers Association and yourself, given the fact of what's going on now with fuel and with commodity prices and everything else. This one promises to be a really interesting Coffee with Corn as well. We look forward to hearing a little bit more about that from you. And of course, a little bit later on this evening, the Grain Marketing Basics Workshop will be wrapping up. This will be the third in that series. We'll be talking about the application of a lot of those basics. And as we mentioned before, Jim, all this information is available and viewing not only this presentation today, but all the other presentations, they're available at the micorn.org website, right?
Correct.